Hey guys, this is Venger Satanis. What's up? Fortunately, I have a little bit of a cold that I got from my eldest daughter, as I usually do, about once a month or once every 6 weeks. I end up getting sick for like 3, 4, or 5 days. Anyway, it's pretty mild usually, and hopefully I'll be over it in a day or two. Anyway, this video is generally about old school versus new school role-playing games. I'm talking about paper and pencil tabletop role-playing games. And specifically, it's about Vampire the Masquerade, which I consider an old school game, role-playing game. Part of the old school renaissance. And I know others don't. In fact, I just wrote a blog post on my blog. I'll put the link down there. Anyone who wants to read it. It's all about old school gaming. Every once in a while I throw in a movie review or something like that. But otherwise, it's all about role-playing game stuff. Anyway, this guy commented and he's like, by any measure, stretch, whatever, I'm paraphrasing from what I can remember of his post, Vampire the Masquerade is not old school. It is definitively part of the new school, or it's like the first of its kind. It's the start of the new school, or something like that. I guess from the outset, if just someone was thinking linearly or annually, just thinking by the year. Vampire the Masquerade came out in 1991. The first edition of Dungeons and Dragons came out in 1974. Oh, okay. And other games that came out in the 90s, those were very new school. So I guess I can see why someone would think that. However, I vehemently disagree. I think Vampire the Masquerade is very, very much old school. If I was to define old school in just one word, it would be non-standard or non-standardization. And even though there are firm, rules, just like any role-playing game, it's got a rule book, it has rules. Every rule book has that, just like almost every rule book has a sentence or two or paragraph saying, ultimately this is your game. Do with it what you like. If you want to bend the rules or rewrite them or something, take something out, add something in, do it. It's your game. We give you permission. Not that you need it. How are we doing? Am I running out of battery? Let me see. No, I think I'm doing okay. So I don't know how long this video is going to be. Hopefully not that long. But for one thing, I want you to comment and give me your thoughts. Is Vampire the Masquerade, specifically I'm talking about the first edition. I can definitely see where maybe Requiem is new school, perhaps, or maybe the second and third edition of Vampire the Masquerade. I don't know if you can make a case for that if the first edition isn't, but anyway, first edition, I think it gives the storyteller a lot of rope in which to make something awesome or possibly to hang himself. It also gives the players a lot of choice and not prescripted, like regimented mechanical choices or a variation of optional non-choices like 4th edition D&D. But it's so open-ended, and that's the cool thing. In my response to this guy that posted about the new school stuff, I said, think about the fact, perhaps, that Vampire the Masquerade is unique, and it is a complete anomaly in the role-playing game timeline from 1974 to 2013. It is its own thing, and it is sort of outside the old school new school dichotomy, um, which is actually pretty fitting, probably. It's the third side, which is neither one nor the other, but transcends both. Um, However, for the purposes of just having fun and playing games from our past that have a certain amount of non-standardization, say that 5 times fast, I think you can definitely call the first edition of Vampire the Masquerade old school. And I think it deserves to be treated as such in conversation, which means that even if it's its own thing or part of the third side, I don't think people that have forums or blogs or communities or groups or Google things, whatever, should discount or disregard or shut out Vampire the Masquerade players or storytellers or people that just want to talk about the game, enthusiasts, fans. Old school should be the old school Renaissance should be as inclusive as possible. Not so much where it needs to be a place for those who play older games that aren't in fashion anymore. And I think Vampire the Masquerade definitely fits that category. I don't know if there's a renaissance in the way that there is with old school D&D. Of course, old school D&D is that's where it all began, so for nostalgia purposes, I think it has more impact. But there are bound to be people that are nostalgia for the early 90s. I know I am. That's part of the appeal. Not only do I think it's a fantastic game, and it's not like any other role-playing game that I've ever played, but I had some really great times in the early 90s. That's when I was in high school. And even when I graduated and went to college, in the mid-90s, I was still playing. Not as much, but yeah, 1991, 92, 93, we still doing good on battery. Yeah, still doing good. I remember the 1991 Gen Con, I assume it was then, that I first encountered Vampire the Masquerade, the first edition. And I was at the booth in the Gen Con in Milwaukee, and this guy, sort of a thinly built guy, the guy with a slender build, and he had a long, sort of dirty blonde ponytail. His hair was very much receding in the front, but it was pretty long in the back, and he had white, face paint on, and he looked like a vampire more or less. And he was talking to me about the game, and he wasn't trying to sell it like a normal business person, if that makes any sense. He wasn't trying to make the sale or whatever. He was trying to turn me on to the fact that this was something different, this was something special, and if you like horror and vampires and things like that, if you wanted a different kind of role-playing experience, then this might be the game for you. And it turned out, I found out later, that it was Mark Reinhagen, that he was, he's the creator, and he was, manning the booth and took the time out to tell me about Vampire or whatever. So I bought it then and there, and there's just some great stuff there, and it is so open-ended. There's, they describe the clans, and that's why I like first edition, is because they give you all this territory, and they plant little tiny seeds of there might be other clans, and vampires are out there, and some of them do it this way, but some definitely do it a different way. But we're not going to fully describe everything. And there's the Sabbat or Sabbat or whatever, but we're not going to they're just talked about briefly. They're mentioned maybe half a dozen times. It's just I can imagine in my mind's eye this sort of dark, gray, misty shrouded city, and there's all this stuff going on, and it's very loosely defined, but there's just so many. It's just so much open. I definitely think that's an old school quality, because a lot of the things I liked about Dungeons and Dragons, and a lot of things that most of us, older guys and girls, that liked about Dungeons and Dragons is that everything wasn't, written down, and so much was left open to interpretation, and the rules for like creating a character and getting started were easy, and then everything was just wide open. Back then I was also playing the West End game Star Wars, the D6, and that's the same thing. I mean, you could create a character in like 15 minutes with your template, and you could just start playing. Just start, blasting Imperial stormtroopers, and you could be like a young Jedi, and you could be doing all this crazy stuff, or like an alien or a droid, and or whatever. Same thing with the vampires. The only thing I do with my game, the vampire game that I'm starting now, that's different than first edition Masquerade, is instead of using generation, I use blood potency, because I think that's a much cooler element, and it doesn't tie the game to Cain and whatever generations of vampires follow him. Blood potency is kind of its own mechanic. It reminds me of some of the vampire movies that have come out in the last decade, like Underworld. Anyway, this video has probably gone way too long. Thank you for sticking with it and hearing me out. And please, if you have an opinion, comment or leave a video response or write on my blog. And don't just say like a word like new school or old school or third side. I mean, that's good too, but if you could like back it up with some, encouraging words or original thoughts or something, your own view, your own reasoning why this is the way it is in your opinion, that would be awesome. Okay. Yeah, Cthulhu Fatagan.